Hello, me again. This time thought I'd step my game up a little bit with a light, better camera, microphone. I'm even wearing my business shirt. Look at this shirt. It's good shit. Oh, we're announcing something on Friday. It's something that's been in the works for a little bit, and now's the perfect time for you guys to watch it. So we have a cover in the works, My Curse by Killswitch Engage, which is pretty sick. Max Smith, the drummer for that cover, is in the band I Am the Shotgun. He just came out with some good new music. Again, if you want to join the mix contest, we have a lot more signups this month than we did last month, which is awesome. This is our second time doing this. Gabe from the band Remain and Sustain won the last mix competition, and it sounded really good. Hoping to do a lot more of these, and I hope you guys have been having fun with these stems. Last time I talked about drums, tuba, and master settings. This time I'm going to talk about bass and guitar. And it's pretty straightforward. The bass stuff is inspired by Nolly. It's a video that you can find on YouTube when he was on Nail the Mix. First, obviously, I'm running Contact. That Contact instrument gets fed into this Steven Slate Virtual Mix Rack, SSL, 1176, and then trimmed off a little bit of gain. This is a big one from Nolly, which is the FabFilter Saturn. It's kind of like multi-band distortion, so that way you can apply distortion on specific parts of the frequency spectrum and not others, and you can do different characters of distortion. For my impulse response, I'm using a Sennheiser 421 on a SVT 810. Then I'm using Virtual Mix Rack again with this parallel EQ. I'm using this to bring up a bunch of the string attack and a little bit of the low end, not the super subby low end, but the more mid low end. Going into a Neve with the drive on. Then it then gets fed to this R bass by Waves, which is kind of like a sub-harmonic exciter. So that's so much for the bass instrument itself, which is kind of like the raw tone. Now processing it into the mix, I go into a bass automation bus. I don't know if you saw the video last time, you might remember there was a drum automation bus. There is also a bass automation bus. And that starts off with this REQ2. It has a high pass and low pass filter. Going into the Son EQ, which is kind of like a Neve style EQ. I'm pushing the mids, I'm pushing a lot of the low end so it can have a little bit of that smiley face kind of vibe, you know. That goes into a CLA 3A, which is doing like a hard limit on the bass, kind of pinning all of my dynamics in place. That goes into another subharmonic exciter. So that's for the bass automation bus. That bass automation bus feeds to a bass master bus, which is what's going on here. This starts off with an L1 limiter. This is where I was talking about, I don't know if you remember in the last video, the kick drum has a side chain to the low end of the bass guitar. That's so that the kick drum low end can come through when the bass guitar is playing. This boost is so that all of the notes on the bass guitar can have more or less the same amount of low mids. And what happens is when you're playing a bass guitar, some of the lower strings can sometimes lose the bass response because they're tuned too low or too wobbly, and sometimes that low end gets focused, or those low mids get focused more on the high tension strings, which is usually the higher strings, higher tuned strings, or it can sometimes even be the lower tuned strings but on the higher frets above the 12th fret. So that's what this is supposed to address. It's supposed to compress the times that gets too accentuated, but at the same time it's a boost, and it's supposed to boost all of the times where it's not accentuated enough. Also adds a lot of space for guitars to fill that up, which I'll show you in a second. After that, I have a Pro Q2 with a hard brick wall at 20 hertz because you don't need anything below that. After that, I go into this Gem EQ, which I usually use as a last stage kind of EQ in order to add some harmonics, and that's what I'm using it here for. Taking away some of that flubby low end. I'm making even more space for guitars here, it looks like. This is the virtual channel by Stephen Slate. It makes it so that everything sounds like it's coming out of the same SSL. In order to balance the bass and the drums, I'm going to turn off this speaker. I'm going to listen to one speaker, and I'm going to pan my master bus to the center. That way I can hear the mix in mono on one speaker. That sounds good to me. Now let's get in here on the guitar track. I start with another Sony EQ. That then gets fed to this API compressor. It's kind of there to add punch and thicken up the guitars and add a little bit of that low end thump that I really like this compressor for. I didn't really talk about this last time, but it also has 3 knee settings, a tone setting, and a tone type setting. The tone type, I believe, refers to 2 different models of this hardware, but the tone thrust detector is probably the most important thing. So the thrust is kind of like an input filter. It filters the inputs based on these 3 different graphs. The normal is flat. The mid thrust looks to be a kind of high pass filter and a high end shelf of some kind, and the loud thrust seems to be a tilt EQ that brings up the high frequencies and brings down the low frequencies. The most important thing here is that I didn't have a DI. I didn't have a DI from Daryl so that I can reamp both of those guitars to the same tone. I found that his tone was kind of hard to match on my stuff. He has like an Axif X3 and I have a Helix LT. It's gonna be hard to do a tone match. But regardless, I found a way of doing it in the box. This Pro Q2. This is where the sauce happens. This is how I'm able to solo both guitars and EQ them at the same time with the same EQ and try to tone match them. A lot of the discrepancies in the high-end response, and the high-end needed to be treated differently on both guitars. That goes into the same virtual channel. Let's listen to it with the bass and the drums. Well, anyways, thanks for watching this video. Just trying to keep it short for you, and I'll see you next time.